Today, I want to talk about a very special kind of book. The kind of book that smells like cinnamon and sounds like the crunching of leaves beneath an old man's boot. Today, we're going to be talking about books that feel like autumn, that get you in the mood for the season, and we're going to be starting with The Fisherman by John Langan. So The Fisherman is about two grieving widowers who find solace in fishing amongst the Catskill Mountains when they stumble upon this kind of like little isolated area known as Dutchman's Creek. And it seems peaceful and idyllic, but this little creek has an awful ancient history that offers them a way to gain back what's been lost, but that comes at a terrible price. Kind of a Faustian bargain going on. Faustian bargain? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I think so. This genre is cosmic horror with some really wild scenes. I think that the grief is handled really well, although not as well as This Thing Between Us by Gus Marino, which I think is the best representation of grief that I've read in a long time. This is a book that I'm reading right now. I haven't got to the ending. I'm at about 75% in, enjoying it very much. Who knows? Maybe the ending will be bad and I'll hate the book. That can happen. But it is definitely, undoubtedly, one of the most autumnal little books that I've ever read. Very atmospheric. Many of the scenes kind of they're set in what I think of as a uniquely American Gothic setting, and they're often sipping coffee in a diner while the rain thumps against the window panes. The next book is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. The protagonist in this book is a guy called Oliver Marks, and he's just finished a 10-year prison sentence for a murder, but no one's really sure if he did it or not. He never confessed to the murder. And when he gets out, that's when the book kind of begins, and he speaks to the detective who locked him up, this guy called Colburn, and he's retiring from the force, and he wants to know the truth about what really happened that night. And so this book is a retelling of the events of that murder. That's where the majority of the book is set. It kind of jumps back and forward in time, but the majority of the book is set back in the day when he was attending this really super elite college, and he was one of 7 actors that were studying Shakespeare. These actors are hardcore. They're what you definitely call method actors. Things start to kind of get messy when the dynamics between them change and take the shape of the characters that they portray through different Shakespeare plays. And then suddenly life is imitating art in a really dangerous way. And one of the 7 end up dead. And now they're all kind of scrambling, not just to convince the police that they're innocent, but also to convince themselves that they're innocent and that their actions are justified. I'm no spoilers. I'm not saying who did it or what or anything like that, because it hinges on the mystery as well. And it's got that kind of dark academia vibe as well. So I would say enjoy this with gingerbread and peppermint tea. The next book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, one of my favorite books of all time, written by a teenage girl over 200 years ago. Unbelievable. Whenever I remember that, it blows my mind. Frankenstein is a very famous book about a scientist obsessed with unlocking the secrets of life and creates a living being from various body parts of corpses. And his creation, who in this book never gets a name. Sometimes people think that the monster is called Frankenstein. That's a very common misconception. But he's actually referred to as just the monster or Frankenstein's monster. And initially, this monster is very kind-hearted, but kind of becomes bitter and vengeful after being rejected by society and his creator due to his terrifying appearance. And so the monster seeks revenge on Victor Frankenstein as the kind of creator and the creation are locked in this destructive pursuit of one another. And the reader gets to decide which one of these is really the monster, you know? But yeah, this story explores themes of ambition and responsibility, especially the responsibility of science. You know, just because you can do something, does it always mean that you should do something? Should we always be pushing the boundaries? It's also about isolation and the consequences of playing God. A lot of people are expecting this book to be quite scary. I don't really find it to be very scary. The book is definitely more of a tragedy than it is a horror, in my opinion. Much better than I was expecting, and you can see why. After you read it, you can see why this book is still celebrated 2 centuries after it was written. Madness. The next book, which I feel has that kind of autumnal vibe, is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This book is set on an Irish island where a very kind of high-profile wedding is taking place. The bride is this successful magazine publisher, and the groom is this TV star who's just found success, and I think he's like a TV presenter, you know? And then the tensions you can sense right away as the guests start to arrive for this wedding that there is tension between a lot of these people. They're kind of simmering just under the surface, and it's revealing hidden secrets about each other and past grudges that were never resolved. And so the narrative alternates between all of these multiple characters, each with their own perspective, each with their own hidden secrets. You've got the bride, the groom, the bridesmaid, the wedding planners. I read this physical book, but then I also listened to the audiobook, and it's performed by all these different actors that do a great job. So if you like audiobooks, I would recommend the audiobook for this one. And then this storm traps everyone on the island, and it kind of increases this sense of isolation and unease. You know, all these people are trapped here together in the darkness, and a murder occurs during the wedding, and then the story shifts into this kind of tense whodunit. It feels very Agatha Christie-esque. All of the events start to unfold, and all of the secrets start to come out, and the passions rise, but it's all set, like I say, on this rainy Irish island. And what can be more autumnal than that? Next up is Salem's Lot by Stephen King, one of my favorite Stephen King books. Of course I was going to include a Stephen King book, right? This is about Ben Mears, who is a writer that returns to the small town of Jerusalem's Lot, also referred to as Salem's Lot in Maine. And this is where he spent part of his childhood that still haunts him today. And he hopes that he can write a book about the mysterious and sinister Marston House, which is like this abandoned home that overlooks the town. And it's always kind of been like an unsettling force in the town that people can kind of feel. It's like this oppressive force. Around the same time that Ben Mears arrives, 2 strangers named Straker and Barlow move into the Marston house, and they open this antique store in town. And that's when the strange occurrences begin, including the disappearance of a young boy and the death of several townspeople. And it soon, after a little while, becomes clear that Barlow is a vampire, and the town is slowly falling under his control. I would say this is one of the scariest depictions of vampires that I've ever read. It's kind of got this slow progression, which for me was the most scary part. You know, Ben, along with his few allies, including there's a doctor, there's a school teacher, they try and stop the spread of vampirism. Next up is Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is a fantasy book with a kind of adult feeling of realism. Some people say that it's like Harry Potter for people in their 40s. This story follows Quoth. Quoth is spelt Kvothe, I think. Quoth, though, and he is this legendary figure who's now living in hiding as an innkeeper under an assumed name. And in this book, Quoth recounts his life story to a chronicler, and he begins with his early years as a gifted child, traveling in a troupe of performers, and then after his family are tragically killed by mysterious beings known as Chandrian, I think it's pronounced, Quoth is left orphaned and just completely destitute. And he eventually makes his way to this magical university, Harry Potter, right? It kind of feels like Harry Potter. And here he is pursuing knowledge, particularly about a type of magic called sympathy, in a quest to become very powerful and ultimately seek revenge on the creatures that hurt and that killed his family. This story has a kind of reflective, nostalgic tone. The characters all hang out in rustic taverns and libraries and shadowy landscapes. If it's raining outside, this is the book to read. Next is Wolf Road by Beth Lewis. This, I would say, is probably one of the lesser known books on this list, but it's still one that I really enjoyed. It's about Elka, who is this young girl who grows up in the wilderness of a post-apocalyptic dystopian world after being raised by a survivalist named Trapper. And she's kind of like learning all of the survival skills from this guy. Later on, she discovers that Trapper is not who she thought he was. He's this wanted, dangerous man, and she's been unknowingly living with him for years. And so Elka decides that it's time to leave, and so she embarks on a dangerous journey across this kind of wild, unforgiving landscape to find her real family and escape Trapper. And along the way, she's hunted down by Trapper, who taught her everything that she ever knew, and also this determined female police officer named Lion. And she believes that Elka is complicit in the crimes that Trapper has been committing. And so most of this book is about a young girl who has been hardened by the wilderness in this apocalyptic landscape, navigating these harsh woodlands and building campfires, using all of her survival skills in this dark and gloomy, overcast world. Another book that I read and loved recently that had that kind of autumn vibe to it is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in a trilogy, which is also part of a larger series known as The Realm of the Elderlings. And this first book follows Fitz, who is the illegitimate son of royalty, and he's been abandoned as a child and raised by a stable master. Fitz discovers that he has this magical ability known as the Wit, which allows him to communicate with animals. And he's eventually taken in again by the royal family, who secretly train him to become an assassin and develop skills in order to serve the crown. As I've mentioned before on this channel, this is one of the most sensory books that I've ever read. There's such a focus in Robin Hobb's writing on the feeling of the warmth of a fireplace and the taste of spiced rum and broth from the castle kitchens, the sound of echoes of boots scraping against stone within the castle walls as the rain falls outside. Very sensory, very vivid. Not everybody loves this book because it's kind of told at a slow pace, but it is maybe one of the most cozy feeling books that I've ever read. And I really look forward to continuing this trilogy. But like I say, it does have that kind of slow pace, and it's atmospheric rather than plot driven. The next book is Legends and Lattes. This is one that I listened to on Audible, and it was actually read by the author, Travis Baldry. And I really like that this is included in the list because not all autumn books need to be dreary and depressing. And this book is actually really light-hearted and it's very low stakes. It's just relaxing, The main character in this book is Viv. She is an orc and a former mercenary who decides that she just wants to retire from all the bloodshed and the adventuring, and she just wants to relax and open up a coffee shop in this fantasy small town filled with creatures and cobbled streets. The town has never heard of coffee, and so Viv introduces it to the locals, and she gets the help from this small team that she builds up while she's there, including this kind of miserable old carpenter and a succubus and a little rat baker. And I really enjoyed this book because you kind of feel like, again, I suppose it's that sensory thing. You feel as though you can taste the things that they were making. And in fact, when I was reading it, it made me feel a bit hungry. You know, when the little rat is coming up with these new recipes, I was like, oh, I kind of want to go and get what do you call it? A bear claw? I love those things, man. This is just a lovely, heartwarming little story. I think it will qualify as progression fantasy because what we see is the team slowly come up with new drinks, new baked goods in this kind of dusky little village. Just before I give you the next book, which I think the next book is just perfect for autumn, I would love for you to suggest some great autumnal reads of your own in the comment section down below. It doesn't matter what genre it is, as long as they have that kind of autumn vibe. Do you know what I mean? I mean, honestly, there's so many that I can think of. It could be any book by Donna Tartt, you know? Now that I think about it, maybe I should have included some of them. But anyway, it's a top 10 list. So, okay, this next one's kind of like a 2-for-1. The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. This is a classic short story about an unnamed narrator who visits his childhood friend, Roderick Usher. And Roderick lives in this decaying mansion with his ailing twin sister, Madeline. And this used to be the home of a great American family, very wealthy and kind of prestigious, connected with high society of their day. And now what's left of the family are just these two siblings. And Roderick suffers from kind of like extreme sensitivity to light and sound and textures. And Madeline is mysteriously just wasting away. She exists as this kind of apparition in the background, this kind of ghost that floats from room to room. And the Usher family, the home is described in this really eerie way. Everything's crumbling, and it reflects the decline of the family itself. But like I say, this one's a 2-for-1 because if you'd like a modern adaptation of this book, then you can read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I prefer the original, but you know, I'm a little bit of a pretentious prick, you know. No, seriously, I did like this as well. It's got that gothic feel to it, but I think that this one is a bit more ambiguous, whereas this one gives a bit more of a clearer resolution, I would say. And also, you know, if I want to get really specific, I would say that this book would be perfect to read at the end of September and the beginning of October, where spooky season, in my opinion, officially begins, when you start to really get into your horror books, if you haven't already started. Speaking of which, I'm actually going to be coming out with some videos soon of the best horror books that, in my opinion, are scary for adults. I'm compiling a list right now, so when I release it, I'll make sure to put it up here, and if it's not here yet, then you can subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and then you'll be notified when the video comes out. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy reading.